here as an advocate with us. She will be speaking to us as a witness to the aftermath of the kibbutz massacres. I personally want to thank Eva for responding so quickly to our request and making time for us in the busy schedule.
Good evening. I am Eva Wyner, and I proudly serve as the Deputy Director of Jewish Affairs for New York State's Governor Kathy Hochul. Today, I stand before you in solidarity with Israel, just a few miles from where I lived for many years in Aberdeen, New Jersey, where my mom, Rabbi Lisa Malik, was the rabbi of Temple at the time. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you all. What I witnessed in Israel can only be described as a living nightmare, a hell on earth. 1 week after the October 7th massacre, without hesitation, I packed my bags and boarded a flight to Israel, only telling my parents when I was in the airport. However, the usual excitement of returning to the Jewish homeland was replaced with an agonizing feeling of pain and worry. Despite having visited Israel so many times in the past, my usual sense of longing for the next trip was replaced by a deep sense of sorrow. I departed with a heaviness in my heart, a realization that shook me to the core. Israel would never be the same again. We, as a Jewish people, would never be the same again. My typical optimism was eroded by the haunting images that I would never be able to erase from my memory. The stories I have heard were seared into my soul, and the scents and sights I encountered lingered as a constant reminder. Israel, the Jewish homeland that I've always cherished and celebrated, and always will, has now left a different kind of imprint on my heart. I have visited the concentration camps in Poland twice now. Each time, when I returned from those haunting sights, it took a tremendous toll. But I knew with an unwavering conviction that it was critical to witness these places of death and destruction. I knew that it was my solemn duty to ensure that the words "never again" would truly mean something. As the granddaughter and great-granddaughter of Holocaust survivors, I carry a heavy responsibility. I wake up determined to prevent Hitler from having a posthumous victory. I grew up believing in the words "never again" and doing my part to ensure that Holocaust-like atrocities would in fact never happen again. And yet, here we are today, reeling in the aftermath of October 7th, just 30 days later. It's incredibly hard to believe that in less than 80 years after the Holocaust, that same terror has resurfaced and taken hold once again. The echoes of history have returned in a form we never imagined. Not since the Holocaust have we seen such a vicious, deadly attack on innocent Jews. Civilians are being killed in cold blood by Hamas, a heinous, vicious, savage terrorist organization. The carnage and horror we are witnessing today are truly unspeakable. I joined Governor Hochul on this journey to Israel with a critical purpose. We went because we needed to learn about the atrocities ourselves, to hear firsthand the horrors that so many peace-loving people had and continue to endure, to feel their pain and anguish, to see the bullet-ridden and bombed-out homes and blood-smeared walls, the cars burnt to a crisp, to see and hear about families wiped away, and others who still do not know the fate of their families and friends, holding on to a glimmer of hope that they are alive and will soon reunite with their loved ones. Now more than ever, as leaders in our communities, we must show up and we must support Israel. That is the message we deliver to Israelis every place we went, and that is the message I share with all of you today. When we first arrived in Israel, just as President Biden was departing, we visited the Shvaim Hotel, now transformed into a makeshift camp for those displaced from many kibbutzim that had been decimated. Despite the late hour, children played, cats and dogs roamed, and volunteers handed out ice cream and treats. It was almost surreal. But what brought you back to reality was standing in the lobby of the hotel and seeing a white eraser board with names, numbers, and checks on it. That was the list of funerals, 12 that day alone. There was a room where people sat in clusters to sit shiva as they mourned the losses of their loved ones, their friends and family, without a home, without any sense of stability. But life was still going on. There was a room that was filled to the brim with every kind of supply you can think of, diapers and baby food, sneakers of all sizes, clothing. The families that found their way there had nothing. They fled their homes with only the clothing they had on their backs. These are the survivors. As my heart sank from the pain, I also saw the resilience of the Israeli people. A community coming together to help one another to make sure that everyone has what they need as they suffer through this unspeakable moment. There was a young man who had the courage to share his story, that his 4-year-old, his 8-year-old, his 10-year-old, and his wife were all kidnapped that day. That young man also told us about his 4-year-old's friend who lived down the street, whose parents were killed earlier that day in front of him, and he too found his way to their house. And then he was taken hostage to Gaza with his family. Another Israeli man shared that he had been in San Francisco to meet his first grandchild, an unbelievably exciting moment in one's life. His wife was not well enough to travel, so he went on his own. Back in Israel, his wife and son were found held in an embrace, slaughtered on October 7th. These stories are forever etched into my memory. But the next day was even more emotionally difficult, dramatic. That day, we would travel to the very sites of these horrors, to Kfar Aza, a kibbutz just 1 mile from the Gaza border. We were the first elected official delegation to enter into that war zone. Clad in bulletproof vests and hard hats, we could see the smoke off in the distance and hear the gunfire as we made our way through the wreckage, guided by Israel's foreign minister. The village had been completely and savagely destroyed. Streets strewn with broken glass and rubble, buildings collapsed from grenades, cars mowed down, the cloth walls of a sukkah savagely torn open. As we went inside these little homes of the kibbutz, we heard the stories of this once peace-loving community. We heard the story of one woman whose sister had been kidnapped. This was a woman who used to collect money from members of the kibbutz to send over to the people of Gaza. We went into another home. We heard the story of that family's annual tradition at the end of Sukkot on Simchat Torah. Every year, they used to gather at 4 o'clock to fly colorful kites across the border into Gaza as a sign of peace, conveying the message that we are here for you. Let's share something beautiful together. We walked into that home. That family never had the chance to observe their annual 4 o'clock tradition of flying their kites into Gaza. Their entire family was murdered. We saw the blood on the beds, on the walls, and on the floor. And we saw the pool of blood seeping into the kites that had never prepared for flight. Flights that were never flown. I will never forget that image. A Magenta Vida Dome first responder shared with me his experience on the day of the massacre. The dispatcher screened countless calls from the village of Kfar Aza, but in most cases were unable to enter due to the blockade. Instead, they provided telesupport to traumatized individuals. Children. One story in particular stood out. The dispatcher asked, "Are you currently hiding in the closet at home?" A little boy, age 8, answered in a calm voice, "Yes." The dispatcher then asked, "You also have your sister with you, right?" He replied, "Yes." "How old is your sister?" 6. Sheesh. "And how many children do you have in total at home?" "Now we're 2. "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Were you alone at home or were your parents with you?" "Oh, yes. There were parents with us too." "What about the parents? But don't speak loudly," the dispatcher asked. In a chilling, calm tone, the little boy whispered, "At first, my dad went outside. He left the shelter, and then a terrorist came in and killed my mom inside the house. Then my dad came to us, and I told him that mommy was dead. Then we ran to the shelter, and while doing so, they killed my dad and my other sister." The little boy, with unwavering composure, concluded, "Now there are 2 of us." The dispatcher played that phone call for me. I have it saved on my phone. I will never be able to unhear it. Walking through Kibbutz Kfar Aza, it reminded me of walking through the concentration camps. As I witnessed the death and destruction, I tried to make sense of these horrors, but it is not possible. The level of sheer inhumanity is beyond comprehension. And that is why, despite the emotional toll, it is so vital for us to confront the past by visiting those concentration camps in Poland and to stand strong in the face of the present horrors. We must never forget where the lessons of history compel us to act and ensure that such atrocities never occur again. But what sickens me most is that now, nearly 4 weeks later, there are already people denying that this happened. Despite the hundreds of hours of footage and the wreckage that Hamas terrorists left behind, the dozens of rockets that come soaring into Israel each and every day, and the repeated decries of Hamas leadership to wipe out the state of Israel and the Jewish people. There are deniers. So while it is painful to rehash some of these memories, I must do so. It shakes you to your core, but somehow, some way, people suffering through all of this unfathomable pain, sorrow, and heartbreak manage to hold on to hope. It's remarkable. Emma and Julie Cuneo, 2 twin girls, 3 years old. Amelia Aloni, 5 years old, little children, abducted by Hamas. Itai Chen, 19 years old, born in New York City. In his first days of captivity, he missed his brother's bar mitzvah. Idan Alexander, 19 years old, from New Jersey. He recently graduated from Tenafly High School in Bergen County and went on to join the IDF as a lone soldier. Omer Neutron, 22 years old, from Long Island, New York, who joined the Army and told his parents just before Shabbat that he expected a peaceful weekend on base. Hirsch Goldberg Poland, 23 years old, originally from California, whose parents now live in Jerusalem. A video shows that he was taken captive after his arm was blown off when the terrorist lobbed a grenade into a shelter where the festival goer was taking refuge. We need him out. We need him out now. Sagiv Ben-Steve, 24 years old. He went to a music festival for peace and never came back. David Cuneo and Sharon Aloni Cuneo, 33 and 34 years old. On their 26th day of captivity, they celebrated their 6th wedding anniversary. Danielle Aloni, 45 years old, Sharon's sister. Keith Siegel and Aviva Siegel, 62 and 64 years old, from Rochester, New York, a retired couple living a peaceful life in Kfar Aza. These are just some of the names of the hostages currently being held captive by Hamas. In the past few weeks, I have met with the families of each of these hostages in my role here, both in Israel and in New York. We sat together, we cried together, we continue to sit together, we continue to cry together. And now we must do everything in our power to bring them home. Their hope and their resilience are what we must hold on to as we hope and demand that they are reunited with their families. We need them brought home, we need them to be safe, and no one deserves to be treated like a political pawn as if their life doesn't matter. And even as heartless individuals continue to tear down the posters of kidnapped children, mothers and fathers, grandparents and friends, we continue to put up those posters. We continue to share their stories and to show them that they are not alone, that these stories are real, the pain and suffering of their loved ones is real, and their lives matter. I'll close with this, with a message of hope. My emergency mission to Israel with Governor Hochul was not only a trip of pain, there was also resilience and hope that we must cling onto. Everywhere we went, we saw the Israeli people's resilience, people coming together to help one another. We saw it at Sharon Tzedek Hospital, where we met young soldiers who had been severely injured from the Nova Music Festival. One almost lost his leg, and new mothers bringing life into a scary and certainly an uncertain world. We also saw resilience in the food banks, the ambulance drivers, the first responders, and the entirety of the community coming together to pitch in. Here in America, Jewish federations and other organizations have raised hundreds of millions of dollars to support the humanitarian efforts, to support victims of terror, help rebuild damaged communities, and address this unprecedented trauma caused by these horrific attacks and the war. My neighbor, after he flew out to fight in the reserves, with the help of our friends, has converted his New York City apartment into a makeshift donation center where we pack bags with supplies for his IDF. That's the resilience of Israel. And I hope that during this incredibly difficult moment, it brings you some sliver of solace, hope, and strength. Cling on to that hope. And we see that same resilience and hope here today as you stand here in support of Israel. Regardless of your backgrounds or beliefs, you stand against terrorism and on the right side of history. Thank you for standing with humanity, and with that, I say from the bottom of my heart, Am Yisrael Chai.